Polypede Works here, coming to you once again with One Piece chapter 1134 entitled The Owl Library. So, edit, stop. Uta might be canon. Uta from Film Red might be canon because at the end of this arc, and shout out to Zach, my co-host of the Roller Skull podcast, because in the episode that we just did in episode 52, when we're talking about this chapter, he brought this to my attention, okay? Here's the funny part. She could be a holy knight, and this woman next to the person who we presume to be Shanks could just be her, because there's a piece of white hair over her eye, just like how Uta has white hair over her eye. Also, her mouth is covered. Uta's powers are activated via singing, so isn't it weird that her mouth is covered? On top of that, and I have never in the entirety of my existence in the One Piece community have ever heard anyone say this. Do you remember the weird armor piece that Uta wore during her time in Uta World? The weird paladin outfit. She's wearing Eames' crown. It's the same kind of crown. She's wearing Eames' crown. Don't you find that suspicious? Don't you find that suspicious? She's wearing Eames' crown. It's the same type of crown. It's this weird, tall crown. And then she is in golden armor, and she looks like a paladin. What could that be but a holy knight? Like, it's so obvious. Now, the only weird part about the Uta no Mi, or the Sing Sing fruit, is that I think if this is indeed Uta, certain things could be changed for its existence in the canon proper, because the weird entity within the devil fruit, that entity could be canon, as well as Uta World, because one, we have devil fruits making dimensions already. We have the Door fruit, and then we have the Mirror fruit. Both makes the Mirror world and the Door dimension, right? Or the Door dimension. We have both of those in existence already. But also, they even mentioned this on the wiki. So yeah, no duh. But also, the weird big entity within the Sing Sing fruit, Ta Musica, that is very reminiscent of the Puff Puff Fruit's genie. It's the same thing. So I say that to say we have had devil fruits who summon independent entities as a part of the ability already. So nothing that Uta has done is out of the ordinary for what already exists in the canon. With that being said, she could even have an ability to sort of bring this back around to like her being like a special paramecia or whatever. And I did a video on all the things I see that could be special paramecias, but she could possibly turn music into matter. That is a very possible outcome, simply because I cannot see a way that the armor does not become real in the future. Additionally, don't you find it odd that when you break down Uta's design as she appears in Film Red, she has a lot of things very reminiscent of what Mad specializes in? Because right now in the Elbaf arc, we have Vegapunk Lilith. Vegapunk Lilith is wearing headphones. Uta is wearing headphones as a part of her initial design. Also, Uta has these weird shoes that look like the shoes that are present within the raid suits created by Vince Smoke Judge, also a member of MADS. MADS once worked for the world government, so it's very possible that she could have these things in the canon proper because they were probably commissioned by a holy knight at one point. We're going to get into some more Shank stuff later, but I had to bring this up because it's such a big and powerful revelation. The fact that she literally is dressed like a holy knight, wearing a crown very reminiscent of Eam, and the fact that they are teleported in via a power that we are associating with Eam, because it's obviously Eames' power. It can't be anyone else's power. That means that these two things could be connected. I never have heard anyone say that the crown that she wears in her night form is similar to Eames' crown. The fact that it's even called a night form, is crazy. Also, in some of her designs, she has wings, but then sometimes her wings become black. What did we just finish talking about? We just finished talking about Lunarians in Wano and then Seraphims in Egghead, who have black wings. And then previously we had the Sky Races, which were your Birkins, your Shandurians, and your Skypians. So the fact that she has black wings, and she presumably is the woman that we see next to the guy who is presumably Shanks, and the red line was originally the home of Lunarians. It's very interesting that she was even given this in the first place, okay? It's very interesting. So the fact that she is wearing a hood, the fact that even if you relate what's said in film Red about the Figurland family and how she's associated with the Figurland family, it's also weird that Figurland Garland has a hair gag, and if his hair and his beard grows too long, they make a loop. What is Uta's hairstyle basically consisting of? A bunch of loops. It all makes total sense. She has the bunny ear loops, and then she has the loops coming through her pigtails. So throughout her entire hair do or whatever, it's a bunch of loops. Like how Figurland Garland's hair becomes a loop if his hair grows into his beard. Additionally, like I will say later, it's very interesting that Figurland Garland has so many hair, I guess, design foibles in his design, because if you look at him straight on, he looks like a star. When you look at him from the side, he looks like a crescent moon. That's all I'm saying. There's so much going on. So for this to be Shanks appearing with his daughter Uta, and Uta being canon, it would make a whole lot of sense. That's all I'm saying. So thank you, Zach, for pointing that out to me on this week's episode of the Roll Skull Podcast. It is incredible. Also, the place that film Red takes place is called Elgia, also known as the Island of Music. So the fact that Elgia Kingdom also starts with an E like Elbath is just interesting. It's just interesting. So with that being said, moving on with the rest of the video. I just wanted to get all that out because my goodness, that could just be what's happening. Wow. But yeah, additionally, I do find it interesting that Brooke brings up his formal education during this chapter, which makes sense because he is a musician. And so it will be very interesting that he's bringing up his education when Uta is potentially appearing in the same chapter. Also, if Elbath has anything to do with the Jack and the Beanstalk fairy tales or any of its retellings, I could see one, Uta being the self-playing harp that appears in a lot of the tellings of Jack and the Beanstalk, and then Shiki being the chicken that lays golden eggs, because as you know or may not know, Shiki, because of the steering wheel lodged in his head, makes him look like a rooster, and then he is called the Golden Lion. So in a roundabout way, he will be the chicken that lays the golden eggs, and then Uta would be the self-playing harp, presumably. But moving on, we are going to start bottom to top this week because there are some things I want to get into. But first, let's talk about some preliminary things. So One Piece is on the cover of Jump, along with several other characters from Jump, but the theme is that everyone's a plushie doll. So leading the charge of all the other characters, we have a plush version of Luffy, a plush version of Chopper, and a plush version of Nami. Then we have a color spread commemorating the retirement of Kozuki Yao from the anime. If you don't know, Kozuki Yao voiced Frankie for the longest time. Before that, he voiced Betham, otherwise known as Mr. 2, and he also voiced fake Soki King, whose name is Mon Blue Tan is a very odd name. But yeah, this color spread reminds me a little bit of Tank Girl and a little bit of Fallout because everyone's dressed in like this sort of punk, grunge, military type wear. Except for Sanji, he's just in a dress shirt and like dress pants, so he kind of sticks out. But yeah, and all the Straw Hats are holding water guns as they're riding atop a mechanized version of Frankie. And on this Frankie's shoulder, we have the words, "We are eternal." Very cool. I like this a lot. I like how Chopper has a little star on his hat. That's cute. I like that a lot. This is a cool color spread. We got Frankie actually flying over the ocean, and he's got Frankie emblemed on his chest. It kind of looks like what would happen if Frankie had a upgrade for the General Frankie, maybe combined with some of the things he saw on Egghead Island, because this kind of looks like a variation of the General Frankie fused with the Vega Force 1 a little bit. I'm kind of getting that vibe. And this might be a canonical suit of armor for Frankie in the future. I don't know, because it also has these wings on the back too. So yeah, it really does give me a Vega Force 1 type vibe. But yeah, super cool, super interesting. Moving on though, starting from the bottom up, yeah, there's Evil Shanks, bruh. We got Evil Shanks coming in on deck with a very alluring woman who is in bandages. Kind of looks like a ninja. Both she and this Evil Shanks are cloaked in a similar fashion to how Shanks was cloaked when he met the Gorosei. So, with that being said, what's also very interesting about this is that they come in on a bolt of lightning, which creates a summoning circle. This summoning circle, however, is very different from the ones we see Saturn use on Egghead because it is not emblem with a bunch of fives. It's just a star within a circle. There is a hexagon, I think, or a pentagon in the middle of the star, which I think is new. No, the last one had one too. It's just that Saturn's silhouette was covering up. Yeah. No, it's the same type of summoning circle. It's just that the fives are absent. What's so interesting about this is that this, along with the star circle that Saturn uses, are both very reminiscent of the time in which those occultists were trying to summon Satan, but they summoned Brook instead, or at least they thought they summoned Brook instead, which makes me think of a lot of things, okay? As you know, when the time skip was starting, Brook was paw padded away at the same time the occultists were performing their ritual, so they thought they summoned a demon, but it was just Brook, who was pawed by Kuma. What's so interesting about this chapter is that one, Brook brings up how school is nostalgic for him when the Walrus School is introduced, which looks immaculate, by the way. Very cool. I'm glad that the children of Elbaf are being taught something. And two, in chapter 866, while Big Mom was sitting on the coast of Elbaf as a 5-year-old child, we do get to see a giant walrus eating a fish. So I just wanted to bring that up because it's so very interesting that we see a walrus in our first real look at Elbaf, and now the walrus has come back again in the form of the Walrus Folk School. So it's pretty cool in that way. I don't know if that means anything at all. I just wanted to point it out. But to continue, we are also introduced to the biology teacher by standing on her biology in a very reminiscent fashion to how Shirahoshi was introduced way back in Fishman Island. And the woman's name is Ripley. Ripley was also mentioned back in 1133 by Colin. And I believe the bartender as well, who still does not have a name. So yeah, it's fun seeing her here. She's really cool, and she is enamored with Luffy because she seems to be of a similar generation to Haruden. So maybe she'll join Haruden. I don't know. I can't discern whether she's from Brocky and Dory's generation or Harridan's generation? I'm thinking Broggy and Dory's generation because they were infatuated with Luffy's Nika form as well. So I'm not sure. Either way, she very well could become a pirate by the end of this arc because she still seems to be a bit rough around the edges as opposed to Angie, whom is a librarian and Saul's assistant. She's the woman that we met a few chapters ago. So that's cool. And we got two female giants on deck who are new that look very different from one another. Always love to see that. But getting back to Brook, it's weird that he says he finds school nostalgic because if you recall, the time in which he's been seen as a child, he's been seen practicing music and then using the violin bow as if it were a sword. So I think this is a bit of a lead-in to let us know that maybe sometime in the future we will be getting a Brook arc. Also, if I'm not mistaken, Brook is the first actual fencer introduced into the One Piece series, and fencing often, at least in the real world, is associated with academia. So maybe that's where he initially learned where to become a swordsman from. I did a whole video about him possibly being from God Valley back in the day, and it's very funny that the king of God Valley was killed with a sword thrust, very reminiscent of a fencing thrust by Figure Garland. So I don't know. That's something to think about. So yeah, his relationship with academia does make a lot of sense, because he probably was taught music in a very academic way and taught swordsmanship in a very academic way. And then he just broke away from all that and became a pirate, or became the leader of a battle convoy, then became a pirate. So yeah. And there was a whole bunch of sword lore too about his proficiency with a blade. So most likely he was taught in an academic fashion. Then because of his talent, when he became the leader of the battle convoy, that's when the name of the technique was changed. And because it was called something else initially, makes me think that, yeah, this technique was probably taught in school to a number of people. So most likely Brook isn't the only one who knows his particular style of fencing. It's a known craft, or maybe was a known craft. And then over the years, maybe due to the destruction of God Valley, if he is from there, the whole art was lost. Don't know, but I do think there's going to be a Brook arc in the future. That's a very possible thing. Now, going back to the Shanks stuff, I'm starting to think that Shanks could be treated in a similar way to Cavendish. The reason why I think that is because we start this whole arc off with Shanks destroying the Going Luffy Senpai that is the Barto Club ship. So we start this whole arc off with a member of the Grand Fleet, said member of the Grand Fleet who was very close to Cavendish during Dressrosa, right? Then that follows into the new Giant Warrior Pirates being basically main characters in this arc, along with Loki, who is also related to them because he's Harridan's brother, right? So there's a lot of Grand Fleet stuff being mentioned in this arc. We start off the arc with it with Bartolomeo, and then we are continuing the arc with the new Giant Warrior Pirates. So it's making me think that maybe going back to Dressrosa, Cavendish having a split personality in Hakuba was foreshadowing, similarly to how Brook being summoned by the occultist was foreshadowing to this being an actual power that Emu just seems to have. So I think that could be the case. I think this cloaked figure is the real Shanks. What's interesting is that, much like beforehand, we're seeing the side of his face that's not scarred. So maybe, just maybe, the Shanks that we know is actually this Shanks. And they're being presented time and time again as two different characters because they technically are two different characters, like Cavendish and Hakuba are. But one may or may not be significantly stronger than the other. So I say that to say maybe two, this woman that's with him is perhaps a healer or has some sort of Delph fruit ability, in which he can maybe regenerate his arm when he's this other person. And then when he switches back, he cuts it off. Maybe that's a wild thought. But it's weird. It's weird that with all the cybernetics in One Piece now, from like Water 7 up until now, and we've seen so many cyborgs and like weird robot freaks around the story. It's weird that Shanks never replaced his arm with a robot arm. It's so weird that has never happened. But maybe he didn't need to because he has somebody like her, presumably in his secret entourage, who can just heal his arm back. And that's used to keep up appearances. Because what's weird about Shanks as a Yonko in the series right now, he doesn't seem like the other three, nor did he seem very similar to the ones in the original set. The only one that he seemed kind of similar to was Whitebeard, because Whitebeard was just a symbol. Very weirdly underdeveloped now that I think about it, because he was just kind of keeping things in line, which is what Shanks does. Shanks actively keeps the status quo, it seems. He's now out doing crazy things, which is very interesting because Buggy does a crazy thing. Buggy and the Cross Guild, I guess, as a whole, are doing something crazy. They're putting bounties on Marines. That's new. That's crazy. Blackbeard is doing crazy stuff all the time. He is a wild hog. That's been his whole thing since he started making moves in the series, right? And then, of course, Luffy is the same way. He does what he wants. He, too, is a wild hog. So it's just weird to have all these organizations doing all these new and creative things to upset the balance of the world. And then you have the red-haired pirates who just don't do anything like that. So what could be going on here is that this man could be Shanks, because the funny thing about it is that in several times in Silhouette, we've seen a guy who looks like Shanks. During Dragon's explanation of the Holy Knights, there are a bunch of silhouettes, and one smack dab in the center is a man who is cloaked, carrying a sword with a handle on it, like a curved handle that looks like Griffin. So there's that. Then during Egghead, we have this silhouette appear again, and we have a similar man with a sword with a handle. Then when we are introduced to Figlin Garland, he has a very similar sword to Griffin. It's not the same, but it's a sword with a weird handle attachment. And I just find it very curious that once Saturn does kick the bucket, who inherits his place? Figlin Garland. Figlin Garland is now an Elder Star. He's a Gorosei. So I don't know. It's very interesting. Also, on top of that, I find it very, what's a good word? I find it very both interesting and perplexing that Figlin Garland has so many phases to his design, depending on how you look at him. Because from the side, he looks like a crescent moon, obviously. But from the front, he looks like a star, which is very on brand. But then if his beard and hair grow together, they form a loop, and it looks like a moon or a shank. So I like on a ring. So I don't know. And it's very funny that both his sword and Shanks' sword have shanks. They have handles on the hilt. Interesting stuff. Very interesting stuff. But yeah, this figure who looks like Shanks and this woman zap into what I assume is the actual Big Stein castle, the castle that was replicated in Rhodes' big country, his toy country. So there's that. But another very interesting point about this chapter, which I hadn't really thought about, but it makes a lot of sense in hindsight, is that the boxes that Jinbei was moving, and I was joking on him the whole time, like how ridiculous and stupid was that? But actually that comes into being very important here, because this box contains the Vegapunk that visited Ohara and met with Dragon when Ohara was destroyed. And he was the one who oversaw the new giant pirates fishing the books out of the basin. So that is crazy. And unlike the other satellites, this guy is a actual perfect copy. So I wonder, is he the big-headed Vegapunk that we see during that time, or is his head shaved down like the Vegapunk that we've seen recently? Because if it's the Vegapunk back then, he still should have brown hair. Because I think he was in his 40s or 50s when that happened. He was a younger man than he was now because he was a full brunette and he still had the big head. So this box seems a little small to contain someone that big. But I don't know. We'll have to see. But that's very interesting. And the explanation given is that, well, it would be suspicious if Stella left his lab to do anything. So, yeah, I guess in hindsight, that's not a retcon. That makes perfect sense. I just didn't really think about that. But no, after it is explained, it makes a lot of sense. Because, yeah, why would he leave? So, yeah, that's incredibly odd. But now the question is that who has the brain fruit? How does that work? Because I'm so confused about what limit the brain fruit has. Because from the looks of it, seeing as how Lilith wants to build a laboratory here, I guess she and this copy have the brain fruit. And I guess from what she's talking about here, she's going to use the variation of the Stella, the perfect copy, to make another Punk Records here on Elbaf, seeing as how the conditions are so similar to Egghead. I don't know. That could be a thing, because the weird wine bottle thing, I forgot what it's called, that produced the island clouds. Well, you don't really need that here because the island of Elbaf naturally produces island clouds. So that's insane. Yeah. And I can't imagine this box is holding Vegapunk as he was back then, because it's just too small. I don't know. That's weird. And I didn't know their boots, the boots that Lilith is wearing, I didn't know those worked off of Egghead. So that's cool. Also, can I just say, her behind is gigantic. I keep looking at it. It's crazy, bro. I'm sorry. I can't get over that. It's crazy how thick Oda made her. I just can't. But a very interesting part of this conversation is that she does hope to cure or help Kuma, which is very good for Bonnie. And I love how Bonnie looks here. This is a cute, funny baby. I love Bonnie. She's great. So that leads me to think, I wonder if Kuma does come to during the events of this arc, will he give Bonnie his blessing to leave? Or, reversely, are the two boys coming in now, this fake Shanks and this woman, are they going to start repoing some of the things that they see as government property, namely PX0, Kuma? Because I could see that being a possibility, seeing as how he still could be useful, and that could either lead to them reclaiming him or killing him outright. Not sure. Either one is possible. But just looking at all the buildings here, it is immaculate how they're all done. I am very impressed. Elbaf has not failed to impress at all, because the Walrus Folk School, I mispronounced that earlier, but the Walrus Folk School looks amazing. Also, slight little, I guess, Easter egg. I don't know what you would call this, but we do know that King Harold actually commissioned this to be built, because King Harold's whole thing was that he wanted Elbaf to be an actual upstanding nation. He wanted them to trade with other nations. So King Harold has been the pioneer from Elbaf just being a bunch of brutes and savages into being a island of educated folk, which is cool. And it seems like he did not have a good relationship with the others, such as Fallbeard and Mountbeard back in the day, because I guess his motions were just too radical. But seeing as how Loki is still framed with the death of King Harold, we have a country without a ruler. I wonder why Harugen isn't considered the ruler, though. I wonder why. Or maybe he just doesn't want to be tied down by anything. Maybe that's why. Not sure, but that's an interesting thought. But it's curious that we're here talking about the state of the land, because I'm wondering now, with the fake Shanks, or presumably the alter ego of Shanks being here, and this woman, are they going to be the lead antagonist, or is the guy in the casa who may or may not be Shiki going to be the main antagonist? I don't know. That's something. And then we are introduced to the Owl Library, which has the mystical power of enlarging books as soon as they are within the library. I'm thinking this weird owl has something to do with it. Maybe the owl has a dull fruit to make things the same size as it, or a relative size to it, which I guess this could be the canonization of a devil fruit from a filler, or at least it seems like it's a filler. I'm not sure about the canon of Burndy World, because Burndy World had a fruit called the More fruit, in which he could increase the speed of things or the size of things. So that could be a factor here, that this owl has the canon version of that fruit. Maybe he does, which would be cool, because I don't think we've ever seen an animal in the narrative have a paramecia fruit. So that'd be cool. That'd be a first. And yeah, all the books from O'Hara are here in the Owl Library. He saved every last one he could. So that's great. And that does give the New Giant Pirates a lot of, I guess, narrative weight, especially seeing as how now they are a part of the Straw Hat Grand Fleet. What's weird, too, is that there's a chair by this owl. I wonder why that is. Did someone sit with him or whatever? That's strange. And as Robin enters the library, she's reminiscing about Clover, and that makes her cry. That's very cute. That's very sweet. And Bonnie enters the library along with Lilith and Chopper. So that's cool. That's cool. But we get a flash to Loki, who is still chained up to the tree, and he is talking to someone named Moza over Den Den Mushi. We are introduced to a new Den Den Mushi called a snow transponder snail, which is capable of voice recognition and is cold resistant, which makes a lot of sense because it's wearing a little furry coat, a little furry snail guy. I like him a lot. The person named Moza that they are talking to seems to be some sort of noble, but you know what the name Mosa immediately reminded me of? And I know we're going into a lot of movie and filler stuff in this arc, which is kind of insane, but there was a ninja who was under Zephyr, or Z, from One Piece film Z, who had a devil fruit called the Mosa Mosa no Mi, the Grow Grow fruit, in which he had very similar powers to the Woods fruit held by Aramaki or Green Bull, but he could not create plants or become plants. He could influence plants and make them grow past their normal growth pattern. What's interesting about this too is that in this same movie, you had Ayn, who had a very similar ability to Bonnie, in which she could change the age of people and objects, though she could only make things younger, not older, nor could she pull out possibilities like Bonnie. So no, the age fruit is on top, and her fruit by comparison is very, very much so a, I guess, lower fruit on the hierarchy. Basically, she was the opposite of Shinobu, who of course has the right fruit. It can only make things older. However, the funny part about Ain's fruit was that she could actually kill people, because she can make someone so young that they cease to exist, which is a bit crazy. So I'm wondering, while we have perhaps a reference to the Mosa Mosa no Mi, the Grow fruit here, perhaps we'll have another reference to Ain's fruit, or perhaps in this situation, Bonnie is Ayn, seeing as how their powers are so similar. I don't know. And it's very funny too that we are in a cover story in which Shinobu is a small part of. So it's funny how all these things are coming together in a way. But yeah, Mosa just reveals more about Loki that we kind of figured. It seems as though he's just not a bad guy, which makes me think this whole story of him killing his dad is probably a lie. Because As in One Piece fashion, when you have someone who is cursed and spat upon by society, they're usually a pretty chill dude. But in the opposite way, when you have someone who is allotted and respected by everyone, they turn out to be a pretty evil guy. Which, with that being said, Shanks is looking more and more suspicious as we move forward, especially when you consider that Colin was supposed to send a message to Monkey D. Luffy back in 1133. And when we see Shanks in that panel, he looks evil. He does. So, brother, I don't know. I don't know, man. Things are looking suspicious. Suspicious indeed. So we're gonna have to see. But while all this is going on, Brocky, Dory, and the boys are partying. So that's cool. With that being said, I think we've covered just about everything. I do find it funny that the kids of this era are a bit softer than those previous because there is a hard line position to now raise children who are now more civilized than the giants of old, which throws the whole crew off. They don't understand it. They think they're all lame, which is funny. That's why I think Ripley is either of Brocky's generation or Haruden, but I'm thinking Brocky because Brocky knows who Nika is. And that makes me think too that Ripley probably is going to be kind of important moving forward. She has a banker design too. If I didn't point that out, she has a very cool design. I like her a lot. Does her tattoo looks like it goes from her face down to her foot, apparently, because we see it go from like her face to her chest to her stomach down her thigh. That's crazy. That is a long tattoo. Very unique female design. Goodness. And she's got the braids and stuff. I like her a lot. She's cool. But yeah, last bit, I do like that at the start of the chapter, Luffy presents himself like a Yakuza boss. And everyone's confused by how respectful he is. But I like this about Luffy. I like it a lot because it does show his growth in the story as we've been moving forward, that now he is considering himself as someone of note and acts as such. And I think that's really cool. And I think that subtle shift is very important considering that, yeah, he is a big deal in the world. He is a Yonko. He is an emperor. And also, almost forgot to mention, we do have further confirmation that, yeah, Saul was a part of the Marines. And that's how he knows how big of a deal a Yonko is. So just saying, with that being a thing, that would lead it to Dahl somehow. Because so far, it is just Robin and Dahl who have a personal relationship to Saul. And Dahl does beat up a giant on her, like, first debut in a serious situation. So that has to account for something. I'm willing to bet Saul taught her something when they were both in the Marines. It has to go somewhere. So yeah, with that being said, I believe that's all I have for you today. We are on break next week. I don't think we have another chapter until the new year or something. Not sure, but we are on break. I know that. So I'll see you whenever 1135 comes out. Give me your thoughts, like and subscribe if you could. That would be very much appreciated. And yeah, tell your friends about Polypede. What's it?